Welcome to Let's Talk Seahawks. I'm your host, Robert Smith, along with my co-host, Adam Carver-Stellman. This is our first live stream, and you can probably tell by the big old pregnant pause I just took. Normally we're a podcast, audio only, decided to take a foray into the technological world of video and join YouTube. So here we are. Like I said, my name's Robert Smith. I'm here with Adam Carver-Stellman. Today, we'll be discussing the Seattle Seahawks roster free agents and what we think the Seahawks need to do in order to maintain the success that they showed in this last season. Adam, let's talk Seahawks.
Let's. I want to thank you for waiting until I shaved my head and grew my Richard duster out before deciding to go live. I miss my beard, and you folks at home will miss it too someday. Yeah. So here we are. I'm already bombing this. This is our first live broadcast. First time we've gone live streaming, and I feel like opening night for a stage play, and I've forgotten my lines. So that's my intro. Back to you, Robbie.
Today, we're going to be going over the Seattle Seahawks roster free agents. Let's go ahead and just get on with it. So let's first take a look at the Seahawks unrestricted free agents. These are guys who have 4 years accrued seasons under their belt. They're able to go right into free agency and negotiate with teams once the league year opens. This year, that's March 15th. The first free agent that we're going to talk about is a player who I think overperformed. You know what? Strike that. He's a player who grew and lived up to his potential, and that's quarterback Geno Smith, the 2022 NFL Comeback Player of the Year, 9th ranked quarterback by Pro Football Focus. He had a great year. I think this should be the number one priority for the Seattle Seahawks is to re-sign Geno Smith. Adam?
Yeah. I mean, it absolutely should be. I mean, obviously, we've already seen them re-sign a couple of their in-house free agents, which I know we'll get to a little bit later. And I think that was just kind of get that out of the way to kind of see where they were cap-wise to figure out what they were going to be able to offer Geno. We've already heard that we're doing this during the same week that the scouting combine is going on in Indianapolis. I've got a dog on me again. Thank you very much. Bye. So we've already heard from both Pete Carroll and John Schneider. Obviously, at the scouting combine, they were asked about Geno Smith and how those contract negotiations were going. As always, they were a little sly or non-committal when they talked about it. They said it's moving forward. They've still got stuff to work out. But yeah, I think if they don't end up being able to come to terms with Geno Smith on a new contract, that will put a big damper on this offseason. No matter what else happens between now and the start of the 2023 NFL season, if we don't have Geno Smith back in a Seahawks uniform, I'd say that this is kind of a failure of an offseason.
I like that. Strong language. Failure of an offseason. Love it. The next player we're going to talk about is also a quarterback, and that's backup quarterback Drew Lock.
Ostensibly a quarterback. We've never seen him play, at least not in Seattle.
True. He did spend 100% of the time riding the pine this year, warming that bench, making sure that Geno Smith, had a good cup waiting for him on the sideline.
Here's your Gatorade.
Told him good job, good game. He was the best cheerleader on the team last year.
It's always nice to have somebody on the sidelines to pat you on the butt and tell you how well you did. Look. Go ahead. We're getting used to this, folks. Sorry.
I think Drew Lock is a luxury. If we can bring him back at league minimum, great. Otherwise, let him go test free agency. There might be a team out there willing to give a quarterback that came into the league, highly touted, and has some starting experience under his belt, a little bit more of a contract. And if a team's willing to do that, I say you say thank you, Drew Lock, and you let him go to that team.
Yeah, look, I'd be surprised if Drew Lock wanted to come back. I mean, there's not going to, if we, again, this all kind of hinges on what happens with Geno Smith. But if we re-sign Geno Smith, Lock is a backup. He'll know that going in. He knows there's not going to be a quarterback competition. Geno Smith is the starter going into the season. He's the backup. And I think that'll tell us a lot about Drew Lock. Again, I said I don't see him re-signing with the Seahawks. I don't think he's there in his career yet. He's still a really young guy. This will be his first contract that he can negotiate because he'll be fit. He's still in it, or he was still on his rookie contract until the end of this year. So I would be really surprised if he wanted to come back to Seattle. If he did want to come back to Seattle, I wouldn't mind throwing $1 or $2 million his way. I mean, that's pretty. Those are pennies for a really good backup, and I think he has the potential to be a really good backup. I mean, he's started games in the league. He's had some success, but he's not a priority. I don't think for the Seahawks. I don't think the Seahawks are a priority for Drew Lock either, though.
All right. The next player we're going to talk about is our oft injured former first-round pick running back, Rashaad Penny. He was having a great year before he went down. I mean, 6.1 yards per carry. I believe he was leading the league at that time in yards per carry. He had beautiful long runs. Definitely that type of running back that you want to see in Seattle. He was running hard. He was athletic. He could hit the hole and take it to the house on any play. But once again, considerable time was missed due to injury. I hate to say it, unless we can get Rashaad Penny back in a very favorable contract to the team with our current cap situation, I might let him test free agency. And then if we don't end up with a running back in the draft that we like, maybe bring him back post-draft to bolster that running back room.
Yeah, look, I agree. This is another guy that I don't think is going to be a priority for Seattle. I'm fairly certain that they are going to let him test free agency. He may want to do that as well, but I'm fairly certain Seattle's going to let him do that regardless. And I agree. If he goes through free agency, doesn't get a contract that he wants, and wants to come back to Seattle on a pretty team favorable contract, I would say that maybe throw some incentives in there so that if he could make a decent amount of money. Because again, if this guy can put together a full season, he will be one of the top running backs in the league. I mean, 6.1 yards per carry. We already talked about that. He handled. I guess only about 12 carries a game when he was playing for us this year. But look what he did with 12 carries a game. The man's lightning on the field, but he's just not that. He's not often on the field. So this is another guy that I would say let walk. Let him, like you said, let him test free agency. If he ends up coming back, great. That's a huge bonus for the Seahawks because I think with him and a K9 in the backfield, that's a hell of a 1-2 punch. Probably one of the better ones in the league. But regardless, I think Seattle's going to draft a running back in this because this is a deep running back class in this draft. But yeah, this is another guy that I would let go out the door, and if he wants to come back, great.
All right. The next guy we're going to talk about is honestly one of my favorite players on the team, and that's running back Travis Homer. I think he's a great third down back. I mean, take a look at that. Out of 43 blocking opportunities, he had a 93.1 block efficiency. That's somebody you want picking up the blitz. That's somebody you want back there helping to identify where some of this stuff is coming from. He can catch the ball. I like Travis Homer. I don't know if I like the contract, that second contract Travis Homer is going to get in the market. And that's kind of what scares me. This is a really deep running back class in this draft. And as much as I hate to say it, I might let Travis Homer test free agency, but keep the lines of communication open because I think having that third down back solidified on the team is hands down one of those important things that needs to get checked off the list this offseason.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think either way, we need to look at finding a third down back, whoever that might end up being. Travis Homer's a great one. We have kind of shown over the last several years that we're willing to let uh, the guys lower down on that depth chart, even if they are our exclusive third down back or passing down back, walk. I mean, uh, who was it just a couple years ago that we let walk and went to Washington, and he's been lights out there. He's a great player. I think he was their lead running back. The same thing for gosh, I'm really bad with names, guys. I apologize. Former Seahawks running back that just won a Super Bowl with Kansas City. The other guy from Washington is J.D. McKissick. The one in Kansas City is, help me out, Rob. I know you're looking it up.
I'm sure it'll come to me.
All right. Anyway.
Yeah, you're right.
So I don't. Would I love to have him back? Yeah, I'd love to have Travis Homer back. He's been great. But I think, I mean, we know that we're going into next season with DJ Dallas and K9 on the roster. I would be willing to bet that our breakout return man is going to be back. Godwin Igwebuike. Am I butchering that name? I probably am.
Yeah, pretty close.
So we're probably going into the season with those three guys on the roster. Nick Bellore, we know, is going to be back. He technically belongs in that running back room. It's going to be interesting to see what we do with Travis Homer because, I think the Seahawks want him back, but they're going to want him back at their price. So it kind of depends on what he can get out there in the open market, I guess.
Yeah, and just to exemplify the point, he also had 16 receptions for 157 yards and a touchdown. I missed those when I was putting that in. So he can be an asset to us out of the backfield. I hope he's back. Let's see what that will draw cap-wise. The next player currently on our roster, wide receiver Marquise Goodwin. I was a huge fan of Marquise Goodwin through his entire career. A ton of talent, lots of athleticism, and I think he showed it. He did pretty well as our third wide receiver. He clearly took that job from D. Eskridge before D. Eskridge got hurt. And I think he looked good doing it. He's a little bit older. And that might be where the Seahawks falter a little bit on whether or not to bring Marquise Goodwin back. But I would love to see him back. I'd love to see him back cheap because we have cap issues. But I think he's a player I'd like to see as a Seahawk.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he definitely shined in moments. I mean, he's one of those big play kind of guys, but he's also got great hands. He can be just a chain mover for us. Jerick McKinnon, by the way, was the guy I was thinking of, and he obviously was not a Seahawk. So forgive me for even mentioning the Kansas City Chiefs guy. But that's kind of like my thing. For those of you that haven't listened to any of our podcasts previously or are now watching this, just know that I get at least one complete brain fart per episode. So that's my one today. But yeah, I mean, I would love to have him back. Again, this is another one of those guys where let him go test free agency. I don't know that he's going to have a big market out there, even for what he kind of showed, because he hasn't throughout his career hasn't really been able to stay healthy. Just like this year, he was dealing with a nagging, I think it was a hamstring issue all year. And like you already said, he's getting up there in age. If we can get him back, great. I can't. What did we pay him this last year? $1.7 million or something like that. For that, sure, we can have him back. But anything above that, I think we look elsewhere for our wide receiver 3.
Yeah, one of those guys they might be looking for is they might be looking to Laquon Treadwell, who highly drafted, second round pick, I believe. Kind of bombed out in the league and then kind of had a bit of a resurgence this year. You might say 6 receptions, not really a resurgence, but the news coming out of practice and coming out of the team facility is that the coaches really liked what they saw out of Treadwell. There's a lot of potential. They saw why he was drafted so high. Big body guy, sure hands in college. Like I said, he had a bit of production. He only played in 6 games. Most of those are on special teams. I would like to see him back. I bet they can get him back for league minimum for what his accrued seasons level is. And I would love to see it.
Yeah, I think he's again one of those guys that we could, if we can get him back out of a pretty inexpensive contract, I'd say great. Because yeah, when he was on the field for us, he did look good. Like you already said, this guy was highly touted coming into the draft. I think, was he a second round pick? I think he was a first round pick of the Vikings, wasn't he? Or maybe not the Vikings. I think he played for the Vikings though. But
He might have been.
but he was highly drafted for a reason. This guy is a kind of a physical freak. Not quite in the DK Metcalf category, but he's a good looking dude. He looks like he takes care of himself. And like I said, he showed out pretty well the limited snaps that we gave him. I think this is one of those guys that you do bring back if you can get him on a league minimum contract and let him battle it out with some of those other guys that are kind of down on that depth chart for that third receiver position.
And you're exactly right. He was drafted in the first round, pick number 23 by the Minnesota Vikings.
Hey, look, see guys, I got one completely wrong and now I get one right. That's how it works.
Net zero. That's all we're asking for.
Which is that's my nickname.
So one thing that I liked about Laquon Treadwell, and that I know the Seahawks coaching staff rumor was that they liked as well, is that he was willing to block. And one guy who will not be blocking for the Seahawks next season is center Austin Blythe, because news just broke a day or two ago that he's retiring, hanging up the cleats, moving on with his life. Best of luck to him. I know he was out there giving it his all every play. He was a little bit of an undersized center, and we saw him blown up on a few blocking opportunities. But I enjoyed having him on the team. I wish him the best in his future endeavors.
Yeah, he was a really good signing for the simple reason that he knows this offense. He was with Shane Waldron in LA, and we brought him over to kind of play here. I don't think they signed him to be this all-world center. I think the Seahawks went in with open eyes, knowing what they were going to get out of Austin Blythe, and that's a really good communicator that knows the system. And with two rookie tackles coming in, and the rest of the offensive line not knowing this system, I think that's why they brought him in. Now that those guys know the system, I think it's okay that we let him walk. And we're going to get to another guy in just a second that this really affects my decision making on. But good for him. I mean, I think he's played a lot of years, and he's walking out the door. I think this is good for the Seahawks because that takes away that temptation to bring him back, because I think we are going to draft a center or someone that could potentially play center for us down the line in this upcoming draft. And I think the temptation would have been to re-sign Austin Blythe, and that would have cost a little bit of our cap space because he is a starting center in the league, and that's not going to come very cheap. So I think this looks like a good thing right now, and hopefully we don't have the offensive line fall apart this next season because he's not there. But yeah, good for Austin Blythe.
And the next guy you were talking about, I'm sure, was this individual, another center, Kyle Fuller. He played 2 games for us. He was inactive for a lot of games. In those 2 games, he allowed 2 pressures and had a sub 60 blocking grade from PFF. So I'm torn because he knows the system, but I'm not sure he's a player that we want potentially having to rely on.
Well, I think we are going to have to re-sign Kyle Fuller. The one bad thing about Austin Blythe retiring or announcing his retirement is it doesn't give us an opportunity to kind of use that in the negotiating process with Kyle Fuller. I think when we re-signed, and we'll talk about Phil Haynes in a second, but when we re-signed Phil Haynes, we still have Gabe Jackson on the roster, so that kind of helped us out in those negotiations, I think. And it would have been nice to have the looming threat of re-signing Austin Blythe there to help out with these negotiations. But I think the Seahawks almost have to re-sign Kyle Fuller because you don't want to go. I don't think you want to go into the season with only a rookie center calling your plays on the line. You're going to need someone there to kind of help him transition and learn the language. It's always best if you have somebody that's playing that position to kind of show the rookie how to do that. So I think the Seahawks are going to have to re-sign Kyle Fuller.
All right, you just mentioned him. So our next player is Phil Haynes. I think he did pretty well for a backup. And I believe the Seahawks did as well because they re-signed him to a 1-year, $4 million deal. So he'll definitely be here in 2023, fighting for that starting right guard role or backing up across the interior of the offensive line.
Yeah, I do think this is a good signing. He's kind of been that do-it-all guy along the line. He's even played tackle for us. I think he's taken snaps at center. I could be wrong about that. But he's a guy that we know we know what Phil Haynes is. I think he still has some potential he could reach and maybe get a little bit better. That's certainly the thinking that John Schneider expressed during his press conference. That he still thinks Phil Haynes is an ascending player. I'm not sure if he's got much more of a ceiling to reach. I think we've kind of seen what he is, but he is a serviceable blocker along the offensive line. And I think I think he should have been starting most of this last year because the other guy we're not going to talk about because he's not technically a free agent is Gabe Jackson, who I don't believe will be back with the Seahawks this next year. And when I say I don't believe, it means I'm praying that he's not back with the Seahawks this next year. Now that we've re-signed Phil Haynes, so this I think was a great signing.
Yeah, I agree. I think having a reliable backup is great, especially on that offensive line. Along the defensive line, Poona Ford surprised when he came into Seattle. He played really well early on in Seattle. This year, I think the switch to that hybrid 3-4 kind of weird Vic Fangio-esque defense we ran really threw him for a loop. He kind of fell off at the end of the year, picked it back up. I don't know if they moved him into a more advantageous position, but Poona Ford, I would like to see him back. I'd like to see him back. I think right now his projected value in the market is right around $9 million per year average on a contract. And I don't know if we have the cap space to bring Poona Ford back at that price.
I can tell you we don't have the cap space to do that. I mean, if we're going to re-sign Geno Smith for what is projected to be somewhere between $30 and $40 million a year, I don't think we do. And that's sad because I think Poona Ford's a great player. He obviously undrafted free agent that kind of came in and shined during camp and then acquitted himself very well on the field in 2021. And I think he, like you said, fell off a little bit this year learning this new system. Which we can, I know we probably don't want to get into on this podcast. You guys can listen to some of our others to hear how me and Robbie feel about our 3-4 front. But he's not a guy that I think fits well into the system that we have. He just doesn't. I think if we were doing a 4-3 front, he'd be great because he's a fantastic 5 technique player. He has a decent pass rush skill and he can definitely stop the run. But with what we were asking him to do most of this year, he just looked lost, like you said. And he did come on a little bit late in the year, and maybe he could come back and be even better or closer to what he was in 2021. But I think he's going to price himself out of the Seahawks range, and good for him. I think I hope he goes and gets a contract somewhere in that $9 million range because I think he's a great player and he deserves it. But yeah, I don't expect to see him back with the Seahawks. And again, I don't think he fits the system that we have. And I think we need to look elsewhere because we can find guys that fit better in what we want to do on defense.
Yeah, he's a 3 technique and a 4 down front all day long. He can slide over and rush the passer on those pass rush long yardage downs from a 1 technique. But other than that, he needs to live in that 3 tech spot. That's where he thrives. And hopefully he goes and finds a team that is willing to put him in the best position to succeed. And if he's not back with the Seahawks, then I hope he gets out there and gets paid.
Yeah, anywhere but the NFC West. I don't want to see him in a Rams, Niners, or Cardinals uniform next year. That's for damn sure.
So another player who I'm going to call it adds to the list of John Schneider first round busts. And that's defensive end LJ Collier. I mean, he's a former first round pick. This was his 4th year in the league. He had 8 total tackles, 3 pressures. I don't know what else I can say. His best position is probably that 3 technique as well. because I don't think he has the athleticism to play on the edge unless he's in a traditional 3-4 defense where he's playing defensive end and has the threat of a pass rush off his shoulder from that outside linebacker. He's been great. I don't think we need to bring him back.
No, I think he's a let him go. If he can figure it out somewhere else, great. We'll cheer him in another uniform. This is one of the biggest, I think, swing and misses in the Pete Carroll, John Schneider era. This is the guy we drafted to replace Frank Clark, and to say that he hasn't done that would be the understatement of the century. He just hasn't been able to put it together. I think he's a good athlete. And I think he's a decent rotational player. And if we did bring him back, it would boggle my mind to do so. But maybe he figures it out in the 3-4 front that he couldn't figure it out in the 4-3 front. I don't know. But yeah, I don't expect to see him back. I don't know why we would try to get him back.
Yeah. The next player I would like to see back, though, and that's defensive end Darryl Johnson. He's a player we picked up off of waivers down at cut day. Big, athletic guy. He played every special teams unit for us except for field goal. I mean, he was out there showing what he can do, doing the hard work, the dirty work. He was out there grinding. He even looked good on defense. But the injury bug bit, and he was put on injured reserve after just 4 games. I would love to see him back so we can actually see if he really is as good as he flashed last year.
Yeah, I agree. I hope that we can get him back. There were times during his brief stint where he was playing defensive snaps for us where at least I was saying, if anybody named Darryl should be starting along that defensive line, it's Darryl Johnson and not Darrell Taylor. Obviously, Darrell Taylor came on great at the end of the year. He kind of put together. He had a slow start, like most of the guys did switching to the system. But Darryl Johnson, when he was out there, he looked really good. So I would love to bring him back just to kind of see if he can build off what he showed or flashed this year.
Another guy I'd like to see back. We'll have to see what happens with other free agents. It's a position of weakness right now in the roster because of an injury. But I would like to see linebacker Cody Barton back in a Seahawks uniform. Started every game for us. Was out there hustling. I'd like to see him back. I thought he improved as the year went on.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. I think that's the biggest takeaway from me on our defense this year is that this was a new system that all these guys were having to learn, especially the guys that had been here during the last several years, like Barton had. He's been with the Seahawks since he was a rookie, so this is a brand new system for him to learn. And I think he came on much better later in the year than he looked like at the beginning of the year. I mean, we were on the bash Cody Barton bandwagon like most people were for the first several games of the season because he like most of the guys looked lost out there. But I do think he put it together towards the end. This is going to be one of those I think this, of all these free agents, this is the one that I think is going to give us the biggest tell about what the Seahawks plan to do in the draft. Because you would think with the injury to Jordan Brooks, it's an automatic re-sign for Cody Barton. At least that's what I thought when we hit this offseason. I don't know if that's true anymore. I do think that the Seahawks want him back. I hope he wants to come back, but I do think they have a little bit more leverage than they probably had originally, because I think that this isn't a Bobby Wagner Love Fest podcast, but with Bobby Wagner becoming a free agent, I do think the Seahawks are going to be heavily in talks with him about coming back. And if we can get Bobby Wagner back, I think that makes Barton a little more of a luxury. Because I do expect us to kind of refill in this draft in that linebacker position, because it is a pretty thin room. I would like to see Cody Barton back. I expect him to be back because he is a Pete Carroll guy. But this is one of those where I think it's more. I'm watching it more to see what the Seahawks plan is going forward than excited about the player coming back.
Yeah, like I said, I'm a big Cody Barton fan, and just to put it in perspective, Jordan Brooks was the higher touted player coming out in the draft. He is the one everybody thinks is the next cornerstone linebacker for the Seattle Seahawks. And if you look at last year's grades by Pro Football Focus, Jordan Brooks was the 68th ranked linebacker, and Cody Barton was the 59th. So neither of those guys rose to the level of the rest of the starting linebackers in the league. But Cody Barton had a sneaky good year for as down as everybody in the sports media was on him to start the year. The next player, Seahawk guy, drafted by the Seahawks, played with other teams, came back. We loved having Bruce Irvin in the building. I think he showed a lot of, Bruce. He showed a lot of mentorship, leadership. Those young guys got better the minute he walked in the door. I think he was done a little bit of a disservice by the coaching staff, though.
Yeah, I think they were trying to kill him, weren't they? Had him out there for just so many snaps.
70% of the plays on defense.
Wow.
Yeah, Bruce Irvin shined in what he did, and he probably should have been out there for 30% of the snaps in pass rush situations. One stat I added here was when he was asked to cover, it was an automatic completion for the opposing offense. So just let him rush. Just put him in those situations. Let him go get after the passer.
Yeah, look, that's what when we drafted him in 2012, that's what we drafted him to do, right? Or at least ostensibly, that's not what we asked him to do after we drafted him. We kind of put him in, we took him from that rush defensive end to playing as a stand-up linebacker, and we asked him to cover a lot. And I think he got better as the years went on, but that's not what Bruce Irvin does. I would love to see Bruce back, but this would be an absolute luxury signing by the Seahawks. This would be we want you to come back just to again coach up the guys. The man's 36, going to be 37 years old at some point next season. Love him to death. Hope he's back in the building. I don't know if he's going to be back in the building as a player, though.
Yeah, I would love to see him back. Same thing. I don't think he needs to be in the first wave of free agent re-signings. I think he should be somebody who the Seahawks might approach if it's after the draft, after we sign all of our undrafted free agents. How can his skills
after minicamp, after the preseason, after week 1?
Yeah. And now the next player is interesting. This next player, linebacker, is actually scheduled to be a free agent this year, but due to an injury in the 2021 season, and then him being placed on the preseason PUP, physically unable to perform list, he did not accrue a credited season in the NFL, meaning the last year of his contract was actually pushed one season. And Adam, I know you did a little research into that rule, so you can give a little bit more of an explanation, but that is linebacker Ben Burr-Kirven.
BBK.
So how do you feel about him?
It's hard. Like I remember when the Seahawks drafted him. They drafted him to. I think the idea was to draft him to kind of learn under Bobby Wagner to eventually replace Bobby Wagner, because he was a fairly highly touted recruit or pick coming out of the draft. And the man certainly in college showed all the skills. He's a good coverage linebacker. He can rush. He showed decent sideline to sideline speed. But he just has not been able to stay healthy. The rule that you were talking about, I guess that in this last negotiation with the NFL Players Association, it was decided, or it was written that if a player is placed on the PUP list before the beginning of the league year, that league year no longer counts towards his contract. So basically, nothing changed with his contract. It's just we take out 2022 and replace it with 2023. So what his cap hit would have been last year, it's going to be this year. We'll see what happens, because I believe that it's still his rookie contract, so the Seahawks will owe him something if they release him. But if he doesn't stay healthy this offseason and make it through preseason and training camp and hit the field, he doesn't really. I don't really see the Seahawks hanging on to him for the 2023 season, especially not if they do what I think, and that's draft a couple of interior linebackers. There just won't be room for him on the roster, I don't think. So if he can stay healthy and he shines like he did coming out of college for that first year, then great. Looks like great foresight by Pete Carroll and John Snyder placing him on that PUP list, so he didn't count for the 2022 season. But we'll see. It's hard for me to have much of an opinion because he's barely been on the field.
Yeah. So this next guy is Justin Coleman, corner. He came in. It was a signing some people in the media were really excited about. I wasn't as high on Justin Coleman coming back. I thought he could provide a lot of mentorship to our young corners, Tariq Woolen, Kobe Bryant, Mike Jackson, Trey Brown. We have a lot of youth in our defensive backfield. We didn't see it really on the field. And in fact, he only played in 2 games on the defense. He had a few more special teams plays, but when he was out on the field, it definitely looked like he had lost a step. It looked like he was processing a little bit slower than he had last time we saw him on the field with the Seahawks. I thought it was a great story. I didn't think it panned out. I don't think they bring Justin Coleman back.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope not. I mean, I expect them to. We keep going. I keep bringing up the draft. This is also a very deep defensive back draft. I expect the Seahawks to make multiple picks at that position. If Justin Coleman is on the roster for 2023 or we re-sign him, it's because there were injuries, which I think was the impetus for getting him on the roster this last season. Is we just had a bunch of guys that couldn't stay healthy and couldn't get on the field. I agree with everything you said about him. He was a great Seahawks player back in the day. It killed me when he got hurt in the Super Bowl, and I think it also kind of killed the Seahawks. Him and Cliff Averill growing out, I think, were the 2 biggest defensive player impact. Hopefully we cut this when we actually put up the podcast. Him and Cliff Averill both going out in the Super Bowl, I think, really hurt the Seahawks defense when we were playing the Patriots. He left, signed a big contract to play over in Detroit, had a couple of good years there, and then has kind of bounced around since then. Yeah, I mean, I think he's still a serviceable corner. I was pretty mad when they put him in there and took Kobe Bryant out of the slot on a few snaps. I think I was yelling at the TV because I love Kobe Bryant. Yeah, I don't expect him to be back. And if he is back, it's because something terrible happened in the Seahawks secondary.
The next player is also a corner. I don't think we have much discussion on this one. Artie Burns, veteran guy. He played 1 game for us, only had 1 coverage snap. And yeah, I don't think they bring him back. I think they let him go to free agency and see if somebody snatches him up or if he's around later. Maybe they bring him in to camp and let him fight it out.
Yeah, I think this kind of hinges on what happens with Sean Desai. If he ends up signing with a different team and going somewhere else, then yeah, I really would not expect Artie Burns back. If Sean Desai comes back for another go around as a Seahawks defensive backs coach, or was he associate head coach? Maybe he brings Artie Burns back. This was one of his guys. This is a guy that came over with Sean Desai from Chicago, knew the defensive system he wanted to run, knew the language. So I don't know if I was excited about Artie Burns. I mean, this is a guy who, in his heyday, was a pretty decent cover corner. I don't think he's that guy anymore. I was actually surprised that he made it stayed on the roster all the way through the year. I think that's mostly because he was injured the entire year. Yeah, if Sean Desai comes back, I think there's a chance that Artie Burns is in a Seahawks uniform next year. If Sean Desai doesn't come back, there's not a chance at all.
All right. The next guy was a young player who I knew absolutely nothing about until the Seahawks signed him, and that's corner Xavier Crawford. He played 6 games for us. Practice squad elevation for 3 of those. I liked what I saw. Played a bunch of special teams. In those 6 games, he only had 1 defensive snap. But in that defensive snap, he got a tackle on a completion that he allowed. But he was out there. And he played special teams, and he played special teams well. You can't discount the value that solid special teams players bring. And he's somebody who, if they can get him on that league minimum, might be somebody they bring back just because of what he can do flying down the field on special teams.
Yeah, I mean, The only reason I know his name was because I'm pretty sure that there was some talk about how he looked in practice during some of the weekly press conferences with the coaching staff, and they liked what they saw in practice. He just didn't end up making the team because we had two corners that really weren't coming off of the field. One of them being Tariq Woolen, who's had an amazing, I'll say, should have been much higher in the rookie of the year voting, but. But yeah, I mean, if we can re-sign him back on a cheap contract, he's a good depth guy to have. He has apparently flashed in practice, and he had one good snap with us. But you could always use depth in the cornerback position. I don't know if I expect him to be back, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's in training camp at the start of the season.
One guy I was really high on and flashed in the preseason is safety Josh Jones. He looked great in preseason. And then the season came, and I don't know what happened. He's a guy that I've liked since he's been in the league, athletic, willing to get in there and play safety kind of the way that I like to see safeties play. But yeah, he was the 83rd ranked safety. Only played in 5 games on defense for us. And that really was, he came in after Jamal Adams got hurt. He was kind of the third safety that they brought in after Ryan Neal was the next man up. And I don't know, he had 30 tackles and he missed another 10. So that's not a good ratio when you're a safety and you're normally the guy who's stopping people from burning us deep.
Yeah, unfortunately for Josh Jones, he is going to be forever known as the guy that allowed an 80-yard closeout touchdown run by Josh Jacobs to finish us off in overtime during the Raiders game. And that's the only thing that I remember about Josh Jones from the season. That's not true. He made some good plays, but the whiff of a tackle on Josh Jacobs during the Raiders game was pretty humiliating to watch. So we're going to talk about another guy in just a sec who's also a safety. I think one of those two guys probably gets re-signed to the roster. I think it's whoever asks for the least amount of money in their contract. I think the Seahawks would like to have him back because I think they need that depth at safety, considering who our starting strong safety is. Ostensibly, anyway, our starting strong safety. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him back, but I think it's going to be between him and the guy coming up next on our list, and whoever one of those guys will be back. I don't think the other will.
Yeah, so that other guy is safety Johnathan Abram, former first-round pick by the Raiders. Didn't really pan out there. Went to the Packers. Didn't really work there. We took him off of waivers. He played 4 games with us. I thought he looked pretty good. He's not a coverage safety. Not somebody I want out there covering tight ends down the field. He is an in the box, help out in the run game, get those running backs in the flat. He's athleticism out of the box. That's what he brings to the table. As much as I like Josh Jones, I would probably rather see Johnathan Abram back for what he showed us in those games that he played. But I think you're right. I think it's a toss-up between Josh Jones and Johnathan Abram.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you already said it. He was a former first-round pick. This guy definitely still has, I think, a lot of potential that we could unlock. And if anybody could unlock the potential of a former first-round pick in the secondary, it's Pete Carroll. So I think that this might be the guy that they're leaning towards also. But we'll just see. Who knows what he's going to ask contract-wise? But if we can get him back on a let's see if you can put together a full season in this system contract, then yeah, let's re-sign former first-round pick Johnathan Abrams. If not, then we'll go with Josh Jones.
Yeah. Another safety who's a free agent is Teez Tabor. I don't think he'll be back. Personally, he looked a little lost when he got out on the field. I thought he did okay on special teams, but for me, I say it's a pass on Teez Tabor.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he didn't really show anything. He barely, I think, made the field for us, and when he did, it was just because we had injuries or guys were gassed. I mean, we went through safeties like toilet paper this year. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't expect it. He's a practice squad guy if we re-sign him. So,
and now we get into the special teamers. Leading off with our Pro Bowler is Jason Myers. Good thing the Seahawks went in. They locked him up as soon as they had the chance to negotiate with him. He was re-signed for 4 years, $21 million. Seems like a lot for a kicker, especially a kicker not named Justin Tucker. But I think he earned it. He does have a tendency, though, to have really good even year and bad odd year. So we'll see what happens next year. Hopefully he's kicked that habit and he's going to keep this Pro Bowl level of play into next year.
Yeah, I love Jason Myers. I was upset when we let him leave Seattle to go play for the Jets and kept the ghost of former Raiders great Sebastian Janikowski. So I was super happy to see him back with the Seahawks. Look, this is a pretty fair market. Yes, I think it's a lot of money for a kicker, but this isn't more than he was going to get on the open market. So I think this is what the Seahawks had to pay him to retain him. I think they wanted to retain him because we need that consistency at kicker, something we haven't had since we let Hausch walk. So it's nice to have some consistency there. Yeah, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that he puts together a back-to-back great seasons because, yeah, he does have a tendency to kind of fall off in odd years, but maybe not this year.
All right, the next guy. If you listen to the podcast, you're going to hear Adam just lambast long snappers, and I had to come to their defense a little bit during the year. You don't have a long snapper, you don't have special teams, period. That's what it is. He is the most important player in special teams because without the long snapper, the punter and kicker can't do anything. So Tyler Ott, probably one of my favorite long snappers ever. This guy's great. He was on injured reserve all year. I thought Carson Tinker did a good job in relief, but Ott is younger. He's been in the system longer. I want to see Tyler Ott re-signed and back with the Seahawks for the next 4 or 5 years.
Man, I might just keep my mouth shut on this. I'm not going to, obviously, but look, yeah, Tyler Ott's been a Seahawks player for his entire career. I don't see him going anywhere else. I'm pretty sure that's the guy that will resign. Obviously, it kind of depends on what he looks like this next season because he did have to take the entire season off for injury. But I don't disagree with you that a long snapper is one of the most important people on special teams. Maybe the most important player. I don't know. I've never tried to long snap. But there was not much of a fall off, if there was any at all, from Tyler Ott to Carson Tinker. So in my mind, while this is an important position, it appears that anybody can come in and do it. So if there's other long snappers out there that we can get for less money, because we do kind of have limited cap space this year, sorry, Tyler, go play for someone else. If we're gonna get you back at a good price, great. If not, let's find someone who's cheaper. That's my opinion. And you guys can lambast me all you want, but we're gonna talk about the next guy, and he looked solid filling in. So
yes, Carson Tinker. He played all year for us. He came in when Tyler Ott went down, and I thought played really well. So one of these two guys is going to be back. I hope it's Tyler Ott. I wish Carson Tinker well wherever he ends up because he had a solid year long snapping. So there you go.
But he did have 2 missed tackles on special teams. It would be interesting.
He had 1 missed tackle. He had 2 total tackles.
Yeah. Sorry, my apologies on that. It would be interesting to see what Tyler Ott what Ott has contributed over the years to special teams to kind of balance that out. But like I said, we'll re-sign one of these guys. Do I hope it's Ott? Sure, just because he's been a Seahawk longer. But I think that the best thing about a long snapper is not knowing they exist. So
there's some truth to that. If you have a really good long snapper, your fans don't know his name. And that's because he's not being announced by the announcers for missing a snap.
And I'll say this. The only reason I know who Tyler Lott is because there you go. See, I don't even know his name. The only reason I know that he exists is because I play Madden and he's on the Seahawks roster on Madden. I automatically cut him because their long snappers don't really matter in Madden, but apparently they do on the field.
And like I said last year when we were talking about this on the podcast, I am that player who likes to stick with realism, and I keep a long snapper on my Madden roster. Anyway, the next player has already been re-signed by the Seahawks. That is our special teams captain, fullback / linebacker, Nick Bellore. He was everywhere for us. He had 1 carry for 3 yards on offense. I think he may have had 8 or 9 offensive snaps. He had 1 defensive tackle, playing very limited amount of snaps on defense, but he did have 14 special teams tackles. So he was out there showing leadership, and they rewarded him with a 2-year, $6.6 million contract.
Yeah, we were just talking about this. I love Nick Bellore, mainly just because he's awesome to watch when he does press conferences. The man is hilarious. I think this is quite a bit of money for a player that we don't use as a fullback or a linebacker almost ever. I would, if we end up using him as a fullback this next year, I'll shut my mouth and say great, cool, because I think we should use him more often at fullback than we did last year or the previous couple of years. So that's my take on Nick Bellore. Love that he's back. I want my money's worth.
All right. The next guy is kind of a Nick Bellore, a young Nick Bellore, and that's running back / linebacker Cullen Gillaspia, who played 6 games for us before he got injured and went on injured reserve. He had 4 total tackles on defense. He had 2 offensive snaps at running back, and he did his job. So I just think the similarities between those 2 players is amusing. And I would like to see Cullen Gillaspia back at least through preseason and then on the practice squad.
Yeah, he's a great depth guy. He honestly looked like he belonged when we called him up and actually used him during games. If we re-sign him, great. I hope we don't re-sign him for $3.3 million a year. But but yeah, I mean, I know you like this guy. I'm going to be honest. I didn't watch him play enough to have any real opinion on him. But yeah, it's always nice to have depth, and utility players, probably more so in baseball, are important, but they're also important in football.
So those are the unrestricted free agents. And we spent probably a little bit too much time on our unrestricted free agents. So we're going to go ahead and speed through the rest of the guys. Our restricted free agents.
Code for Adam talks too much.
Our restricted free agents, we have 3 of them. Now, with the restricted free agents, I just looked up the cap amounts. If they tender them with a first round restricted free agent tender for 2023, it's $6 million. A second round tender is $4.3 million. And then the right of first refusal tender is $2.6 million. And I believe there used to be a original round tender, but I'm not seeing that on this particular site over the cap that I used. So I'll have to check into that.
Yeah, I do believe Robbie, I'm pretty sure that changed with the new collective bargaining agreement.
Yeah, I think that sounds familiar as well. So this first guy, Penny Hart, I would probably bring him back at a right of first refusal because he did so much for the team. He did not have a ton of production. He played on special teams. He actually played on defense for us when we had a bunch of corners go down one game. He was the emergency 3rd string quarterback for the team. This is a guy who has value outside of just what he's going to do as a wide receiver. I would either give him that right of first refusal tender, or I would try to negotiate a slightly lower amount for him to come back to the team.
How many utility players do we need? We're just gonna have a whole team of utility players. Look, yes, Penny Hart it has value as, like I said, a utility player. Sure, I think $2.6 million is a lot of money to pay this guy for 1 year. So if we can negotiate something for 1 year, league minimum or just above league minimum, great. But he would be very low on my priority list if I were the GM.
This next individual is Tanner Muse. He had 19 total tackles for us. He actually looked pretty good. In the wild card game, he was our highest graded linebacker. He may have been our highest graded defender in that game. He played a considerable amount of time when we had some injuries and he had to come in. Tanner Muse stepped up. He surprised me. But it goes back to your point with Penny Hart. I don't know if 2.6 million is kind of what Tanner Muse should bring right now. So I would try to negotiate that down. It's tough.
Yeah, so if it was between the two of these guys, I would rather play Tanner Muse 2.6 million than Penny Hart any day of the week. I do think that he flashed. I think this is a guy that they really liked coming into the year. I think they want to see what he has going forward. And this is going to be a position where we need some depth. I mean, this is a really middle linebacker is a very thin position for us. And he showed that he's a really good coverage linebacker. I hope that they re-sign him. I'd love to re-sign him for less than 2.6 million, but if we have to do a tender first refusal right, then I say do it.
All right. So this next individual is safety Ryan Neal. Ryan Neal came in when Jamal Adams went down really early in the season. Ryan Neal ended up as the 4th ranked graded safety by Pro Football Focus in the entirety of the NFL. He did everything for us. I would not be surprised if they put a first or second round tender on Ryan Neal. And I think if they put a second round tender on him, there's a good chance a team signs him anyway. And the Seahawks get that second rounder as compensation. He just played really well. I think they need to do what they can to bring him back.
I agree. This is my second most important free agent of the offseason. Geno Smith being number one far and away. But Ryan Neal should, and I believe is a priority for the Seahawks. Quandre Diggs has been pretty healthy for most of the time he's played here, but he does, he's getting up there. He's 30 years old. He does miss time with injury. Jamal Adams obviously misses a lot of time with injury. Ryan Neal can play both safety positions, and he's shown that he can play them both really, really well. I would be shocked and very disappointed if the Seahawks don't find a way to get him back on the team for 2023.
I completely agree with you on that one. These next players are exclusive rights free agents. These are players who have less than 3 credited seasons in the NFL. And these are guys that we just basically say, we want you back. And it's like a push button sort of contract. They get league minimum for the amount of seasons they have accrued, because it's a scale that goes up with every season you get under your belt, or 110% of the previous year's salary, whichever one is higher. So to keep this short, we're going to say the player. If you have something quick, say about him. Otherwise, you're just going to say, bring him back or let him walk.
I'll just tell you right now, my answer is bring them all back.
Godwin Igrebuike, I say we bring him back. He showed what he can do on special teams. So had some pretty electric kick returns.
Agree.
Cody Thompson, we didn't get to see him this year. I think he played 6 or 7 snaps in the first preseason game and then went down with an injury. The coaching staff is pretty high on him. I'd like to see what he can do. This one I'm kind of torn. If they need the space, don't bring him back. But let's bring him back.
Yeah, please bring him back. Correct me if I'm wrong. Cody Thompson is a former Washington Husky, and so yeah, he's an intake. He's a homegrown kid. We didn't get to see him this year, so I hope we get to see him next year.
I definitely look forward to hopefully seeing what he can bring. If there's one guy that they don't bring back, he would be the one guy, because I think of the players on this exclusive rights free agent list, he's the one that's not a surefire bargain for what we're going to have to pay these guys. And he went to Toledo.
Okay.
For his college.
I clearly, so I get 2 this podcast.
The next guy is Miles Adams. I liked what I saw in Miles Adams. I thought he played pretty well. He is another kind of undersized interior guy for what they want. They're kind of playing him more on that defensive end in the 3-4 looks. I know the coaching staff at one point said he was playing nose, but he never actually lined up at a true nose, zero technique. He was playing more of a one technique in their 2 down linemen, ineffective third down defensive looks, straight out of the Vic Fangio ineffective systems. But I would love to see Miles Adams back. As you can tell, I have zero opinions when it comes to our defensive schemes. He looks great. Bring him back.
Yeah, I mean, this guy's great Poona Ford insurance for us. He brings a similar skill set. He's going to be way cheaper. And yeah, there's no reason not to bring him back.
The next one is linebacker John Radigan. I really liked him when he kind of first burst on the scene. Ton of energy, flies around, plays hard, hits hard. Surefire, sure tackler. I like him. I want to bring him back, especially with the injury to Jordan Brooks. Who knows who we're going to field at linebacker next year? Let's have a ton of guys in the room and see who rises to the top, the cream of the crop, so to speak.
Yeah, this is another one of those guys that I don't think we've had enough of a look at to know exactly what we have in him. He's flashed at times. He's disappeared at times. But I fully expect to see him back, if not for any other reason than we are really, really thin at interior linebacker.
And he had a 90.1 special teams grade by PFF. So bonus. Once again, get contribution wherever you can get from these guys. The next one, not often are you pretty much guaranteed to get a guy who has a full season of starting experience under his belt for essentially league minimum. And that's what they're going to get with our final free agent on the roster. And that is corner Mike Jackson. Didn't rank very high, 84th graded corner, but he played and started every single game for the Seahawks last year. For experience alone, you need to bring this guy back, especially because it's league minimum.
Yeah, this is another one of those why not re-signs. He looked great at times last year. He looked awful at times last year. But inconsistency is the worst thing I could say about him, is that he's inconsistent. But he looks like a guy who loves being out there on the field. He obviously plays really, really hard. And I think you need that guy out there in the secondary. Your Brandon Browners, your Cam Chancellors. And I think he's one of those kind of guys.
And there you have it. This is Let's Talk Seahawks. We've been going over the roster free agents that the Seahawks currently have. Hopefully they bring back the guys we like and let the guys walk who we don't like. Thank you for listening. As always, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.